What happens when a young clerk mocks and shoves an elderly veteran out of a gun shop? Within an hour, a force arrives that leaves the entire town speechless. The late afternoon sun hung low over Eldridge, Missouri, painting the cracked asphalt of Brackenridge Road in hues of amber and gold. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth, diesel from passing logging trucks, and the faint, sharp tang of autumn leaves carried on a breeze from the Ozark Hills. Cicadas hummed in the sparse cedar trees lining the street, their drone a steady pulse beneath the occasional rumble of traffic. At the intersection of Brackenridge and 4th Street stood Ironclad Firearms, a squat brick building with a faded green awning and windows cluttered with posters for hunting rifles, concealed carry classes, and a 20% off sale on 9mm ammunition. The shop's sign, its paint peeling at the edges, creaked faintly in the wind, a relic of a town that had seen better days. Elliot Ramsey, a 73-year-old man with a slight limp and a face carved with lines deep as riverbeds, pushed open the glass door with a soft jingle of bells. His silver hair, cropped close in a military fade, gleamed under the shop's fluorescent lights, and his denim jacket, worn thin at the elbows, bore a single patch from the 101st Airborne Division, its threads frayed but proud. In his left hand, he carried a small leather satchel, its leather cracked from decades of use, the kind of bag that held not just objects, but stories, promises kept and promises broken. Elliot's hazel eyes, sharp despite his years, scanned the shop's interior, glass cases glinting with handguns, racks of rifles lining the walls, and the faint, oily scent of gunmetal hanging in the air like a memory. He wasn't here to buy. He wasn't here to browse. Elliot had come to Ironclad Firearms for a purpose, one rooted in a vow made on a muddy hillside in Vietnam, under a sky torn by mortar fire. His old friend, Marcus Delgado, had carried a Colt 1911 through the jungles of Khe Sanh, its weight a constant reminder of duty. Marcus hadn't made it home, but his pistol had. And now, decades later, Elliot had promised Marcus's daughter, Lily, that he'd get it cleaned and polished for her wedding next month. It was a small thing, a gesture to honor a man whose laughter still echoed in Elliot's dreams. But small things, Elliot knew, could carry the weight of a lifetime. Behind the counter stood Tyson Carver, a broad-shouldered man in his early 30s with a buzz cut and a smirk that seemed welded to his face. His black polo, embroidered with the Ironclad logo, strained slightly at the shoulders as he leaned on the counter, scrolling through his phone with the casual arrogance of someone who thought he owned the room. 2 other employees were in the shop. Devin Pollard, a wiry young man with a patchy beard, was rearranging a display of tactical knives near the back, and Marla Hensley, a heavyset woman with a no-nonsense braid, was wiping down a case of revolvers. The shop was quiet, save for the twang of a country music station drifting from a cheap speaker mounted above the counter, its lyrics about lost love barely audible over the hum of fluorescent lights. Elliot approached the counter, his boots scuffing softly on the linoleum floor. His limp, a souvenir from a shrapnel wound in '68, was subtle but present, a reminder of nights spent crawling through mud under enemy fire. He cleared his throat, his voice steady but warm, the kind of voice that carried the weight of years without bending under it. "Afternoon," he said, setting his satchel on the counter with care. "I'm hoping you can help me with something. Got an old service pistol that needs cleaning and a once-over. It's a Colt 1911, Vietnam era. Belonged to a friend." Tyson didn't look up from his phone. His thumb flicked across the screen, scrolling through what looked like a social media feed. "We're booked up for cleanings," he said, his tone flat like he was reading a script. "Try back next week." Elliot's brow furrowed, but he kept his composure, the way he'd learned to in situations far more dangerous than this. He leaned slightly on the counter, his hand steady despite the ache in his hip. "I don't need it done today," he said. "Just looking for a quote. Maybe have you take a look. It's important to the family. The pistol's for a wedding display, a way to honor someone who didn't make it back." Tyson finally glanced up, his eyes narrowing as he took in Elliot's weathered jacket, his scuffed boots, the satchel that looked like it belonged in a thrift store. To Tyson, Elliot was just another old man, probably spinning tales to feel relevant. Vietnam era? Tyson said, his smirk widening into something sharp, almost cruel. What, you dig that thing out of a scrap heap? We don't do museum pieces here, Pops. The word Pops landed like a jab, but Elliot didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. Shouts from drill sergeants, curses from enemies, the silence of men who didn't make it through the night. He forced a polite smile, though his eyes held a glint of steel. It's not a museum piece, he said. It's a Colt 1911, carried in combat. I'll pay whatever's fair to get it cleaned right. From the back, Devon looked up from his knife display, catching Tyson's eye. Hey, Tyson, maybe he's got a whole collection of antiques in that bag, he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. Marla, still wiping down the revolver case, chuckled softly, but didn't look up, her focus on the glass. The shop felt smaller now, the air thicker, as if the walls were closing in on Elliot's quiet dignity. Elliot ignored Devon's jab, his hand steady as he unzipped the satchel with deliberate care. He pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle, its edges frayed from years of handling, and unfolded it to reveal the Colt 1911. Its bluing was worn, the grips polished smooth by a man long gone, but the pistol still carried an air of purpose, like it remembered the hands that had held it. This was my buddy's, Elliot said, his voice low, almost reverent. Marcus Delgado. He carried it at Quezon. His daughter, Lily, wants it for her wedding, to remember him. I promised I'd get it ready. Tyson leaned forward, barely glancing at the pistol before snorting. Quezon? Man, that's ancient history. Nobody gives a damn about that anymore. He pushed the gun back toward Elliot with a dismissive flick of his wrist, the metal scraping faintly against the counter. We're not a charity shop, old-timer. Take your relic and hit the road. The words cut deeper than Elliot expected, a sharp sting that reached into memories of mud-soaked nights and promises made in the dark. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady, the way he'd learned to when facing men with guns instead of egos. I'm not asking for charity, he said, his eyes locking onto Tyson's. I'm asking for a job to be done. You advertise cleanings. I'm a customer. Tyson laughed, a harsh, barking sound that echoed in the small shop, drowning out the country music for a moment. Customer? He said, stepping out from behind the counter, his broad frame looming over Elliot. This ain't a nursing home, Grandpa. We sell real gear for real shooters, not sentimental junk for has-beens. Marla paused her cleaning, her rag hovering over the glass case. She glanced at Tyson, her lips pressing into a thin line. Tyson, maybe we can just take a look, she started, but Tyson cut her off with a wave of his hand. Nah, Marla, we got better things to do. He turned back to Elliot, his smirk now a full sneer. You're holding up the line, Pops. Why don't you shuffle on out before I lose my patience? There was no line. The shop was empty except for the 3 employees and Elliot, the silence broken only by the faint twang of the radio. Elliot's fingers tightened around the satchel, his knuckles whitening, but his face remained calm, a mask of restraint forged in jungles and battlefields. I served this country for 20 years, he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of truth. Carried a rifle through places you've only seen in movies. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want the job done. Tyson rolled his eyes, stepping closer, using his height to intimidate. Oh, here we go with the war stories, he mocked, his voice loud enough to carry to Devon, who snickered from the back. You think that makes you special? Every old geezer in this town's got a sob story. Take a hint, pal. You're not welcome here. Devon, now openly grinning, called out, Yeah, try the pawn shop on 7th Street. They might take your rusty old junk. The words were meant to sting, and they did, but Elliot's face betrayed nothing. Inside, though, a storm was brewing. He'd faced mortar fire, ambushes, the screams of men he couldn't save. This casual cruelty in a place he'd hoped to find respect, was a different kind of wound. It wasn't the pain of the moment. It was the weight of being dismissed, of being seen as less than the man he'd spent a lifetime becoming. Marla shifted uncomfortably, her rag now crumpled in her hand. "Tyson, you don't have to be such a jerk," she muttered, her voice barely audible. Tyson ignored her, his eyes locked on Elliot, daring him to push back. Elliot's mind flickered to Kay-san, to the nights when he and Marcus had sat under a tarp, sharing a cigarette and talking about home. Marcus had joked about his little girl, Lily, how she'd grow up to be a spitfire. "You'll look out for her, won't you, Ramsey?" he'd said, half laughing, half serious. Elliot had nodded, the promise sealed in the mud and blood of war. Now, standing in this shop, that promise felt like a weight he couldn't drop, no matter how many years had passed. "You're making a mistake," Elliot said quietly, his eyes never leaving Tyson's. There was no threat in his voice, only a calm certainty, the kind that comes from a man who's seen the world's ugliness and come out the other side. Tyson laughed again, louder this time, but there was a nervous edge to it now, like he sensed something he couldn't quite place. "Mistake?" he said, stepping closer until he was inches from Elliot's face. "The only mistake here is you thinking you belong in a place like this. Get out before I have to drag you out." Elliot didn't move for a long moment, his gaze steady, unyielding. The shop felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension. Then, with a slow nod, he carefully wrapped the pistol back in its cloth, tucking it into the satchel. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice so soft it was almost lost in the hum of the radio. He turned toward the door, his limp more pronounced now, each step a reminder of battles fought and scars earned. The bell jingled as he stepped back into the Missouri heat, the door swinging shut behind him with a finality that echoed in the silence. Outside, the sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across Brackenridge Road. Elliot stood on the sidewalk, the satchel heavy in his hand, his heart heavier still. He'd faced worse than Tyson Carver, men with guns, men with hate in their eyes. But this felt personal, a betrayal of something deeper than just a service refused. It was a dismissal of his life, his sacrifices, the promises he'd carried for decades. Inside the shop, Tyson leaned back against the counter, his smirk returning. "What a loser," he muttered, picking up his phone again. Marla shook her head, her expression tight. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice sharp now. "He was just asking for a cleaning." Tyson shrugged, already scrolling through his feed. "Guy's a nobody. Probably made it all up about the war hero crap. Let him cry to someone who cares." Devon chuckled, but Marla didn't. She turned back to her work, her movement stiff, as if she were trying to scrub away the unease settling in her gut. Outside, Elliot started down Brackenridge Road, his boots scuffing against the pavement. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out, squinting at the screen. A text from an old number, one he hadn't seen in years. "Heard you're in Eldridge. Trouble?" The sender's name was blocked, but Elliot knew exactly who it was. A faint smile tugged at his lips, the first real one all day, as he typed a reply, "Nothing I can't handle." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and kept walking, the ache in his hip a steady rhythm. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of fire, and behind him, ironclad firearms stood quiet, its employees oblivious to the storm they'd just stirred. The morning air in Eldridge, Missouri, carried a crisp bite, the kind that hinted at autumn's approach in the Ozark foothills. Brackenridge Road bustled with small-town life. A delivery truck idled at a stoplight, its engine rattling. A group of kids pedaled bikes toward the diner on 6th Street, and the faint scent of burnt coffee and exhaust mingled with the earthy tang of fallen leaves. Across from ironclad firearms, Elliot Ramsey sat on a weathered wooden bench outside Brewitt Haven, a modest coffee shop with a hand-painted sign and a single outdoor table. His hands, rough from years of gripping rifles and rebuilding engines, cradled a steaming mug of black coffee, its bitterness a familiar comfort. At his feet rested the worn leather satchel, its contents unchanged, the Colt 1911, wrapped in cloth, a silent reminder of a promise he'd carried for decades. Elliot's hazel eyes, sharp despite the lines etched around them, fixed on the gun shop across the street. Ironclad Firearms was just opening, its neon open sign flickering to life like a reluctant heartbeat. Through the window, he could see Tyson Carver, the smug clerk from yesterday, laughing with Devin Pollard as they arranged a display of holsters. Marla Hensley was absent, likely on a later shift. The humiliation from the day before lingered in Elliot's chest, not as anger, but as a dull ache, like an old wound flaring in the cold. He'd faced worse: mortar shells, ambushes, the weight of a dying friend's hand in his. But this was different. This was a dismissal of his life, his service, the man he'd been, and still was. He sipped his coffee, the steam curling in the morning chill, and let his mind wander to Lily Delgado, the daughter of his fallen friend, Marcus. She'd been a toddler when Marcus died, too young to remember the man who'd carried that 1911 through the jungles of Vietnam. Elliot had stood at Marcus's funeral in '68, his dress uniform stiff, his hand steady as he handed the folded flag to Marcus's widow, her eyes hollow with grief. Now, Lily was grown, about to be married, and that pistol was the last tangible piece of her father. Elliot had promised to have it cleaned and polished for the wedding, a small act to bridge the gap between a father lost and a daughter moving forward. Yesterday's encounter at Ironclad had spit on that promise, and the thought made Elliot's grip tighten on the mug, his knuckles whitening. Inside Broodhaven, the morning crowd was sparse. Kaylee Ortiz, a young barista with a quick smile and a sleeve of tattoos, wiped down tables, humming to a pop song playing softly over the speakers. A few regulars, retirees mostly, nursing coffee and gossip, sat at the counter, their voices a low murmur. Elliot had chosen the outdoor bench for its view of the gun shop and the solitude it offered. He wasn't one for small talk, not anymore. His mind was too full of memories, of promises, of the weight of a life lived in service. He reached into his denim jacket, pulling out a faded photograph, its edges worn soft from years of handling. It showed him and his squad in Vietnam, 6 men in jungle fatigues, their faces smudged with dirt but lit with grins. Marcus Delgado stood second from the left, his arm slung over Elliot's shoulder, his eyes bright with the kind of defiance that kept men alive in hell. Elliot's finger traced Marcus's face, a quiet ritual he'd performed countless times. "You'd have laughed at that punk yesterday," he murmured to the photo, his voice barely audible. "Called him a loudmouth with no spine." The thought brought a faint smile, tinged with sadness. He tucked the photo away, his resolve hardening. He'd try again today, for Lily, for Marcus, for the man he'd promised to be. Across the street, the door to Ironclad Firearms swung open, and Tyson stepped out, lighting a cigarette with a flick of a cheap lighter. The morning sun glinted off his buzz cut, and his black polo strained against his shoulders as he exhaled a plume of smoke. He spotted Elliot on the bench and froze, his smirk returning like a reflex. He nudged Devin, who followed him outside, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well, look who's back," Tyson called, loud enough for a passing jogger to turn her head. "The war hero, you lost, old man?" Elliot set his coffee down, the mug clinking softly against the table. He stood slowly, brushing off his jeans, his limp subtle but present, a reminder of shrapnel that had never fully left his hip. He crossed Brackenridge Road, his boots steady on the asphalt, the satchel swinging at his side. A small crowd began to gather, 2 men in hunting camo heading into the shop, a woman in a red flannel shirt carrying a grocery bag, a teenage boy on a skateboard who slowed to a stop, his phone already out. Elliot stopped a few feet from Tyson, his posture straight despite the ache in his bones. "I'm here to try again," he said, his voice calm but firm, like a man who'd faced down worse than a loudmouth clerk. "I need that pistol cleaned. It's important." Tyson took a drag on his cigarette, exhaling slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Told you yesterday, Pops," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "We don't do relics. Why don't you go knit a scarf or something? Leave the guns to the pros." Devin laughed, a sharp barking sound, and one of the camo-clad men snickered. though the woman in flannel frowned, shifting her bag to her other arm. Elliot's jaw tightened, but his face remained impassive, a mask of restraint forged in battle. "I'm not asking for a favor," he said, his tone measured, each word deliberate. "You run a business. You advertise cleanings. I'm a customer, same as anyone else." Tyson stepped closer, towering over Elliot, using his height to intimidate. "Customer?" he scoffed, flicking ash onto the sidewalk. "You're a walking history lesson, Grandpa. This place is for real shooters, not some guy clutching a rusty old toy." His voice carried, drawing more eyes. The teenage boy on the skateboard started filming, muttering, "This is gonna blow up online." The woman in flannel shook her head, muttering, "This ain't right," but stayed back, her eyes flicking between Tyson and Elliot. Elliot's hand rested on the satchel, his fingers tracing its worn leather. He thought of Marcus, of the nights they'd spent under a tarp, rain drumming above, sharing stories of home. Marcus had talked about Lily, how he'd teach her to fish when he got back. "She'll be a firecracker," he'd said, grinning. Elliot had promised to look out for her, a vow that had outlived Marcus by decades. Now, standing here, that promise felt like a chain, heavy but unbreakable. "I served this country for 20 years, Elliot said, his voice low, steady, cutting through the morning air. "Carried a rifle through jungles you've only seen in movies. I'm not here to waste your time, I just want the job done." Tyson's smirk faltered for a split second, but he doubled down, stepping closer until he was inches from Elliot's face. "Oh, here we go with the war stories," he mocked, his voice loud enough to turn heads down the street. "You think that makes you special? Every old coot in this town's got a sob story. You're nothing, old man." He gestured toward the shop, where Devon was now leaning against the doorframe, grinning like a kid watching a fight. The crowd was growing now, a few more passers-by, a delivery driver pausing by his van, the jogger circling back to watch. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Elliot's eyes flicked to the onlookers, then back to Tyson. "You're digging a hole, son," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet authority, the kind earned through blood and sacrifice. "You don't know how deep." Tyson laughed, but it was forced now, a crack in his bravado. "A hole?" he said, tossing his cigarette to the ground and grinding it under his boot. "You're pathetic, standing here like you're some big shot. You're holding up my day. Get lost or I'm calling security." Devon disappeared into the shop, and moments later, Jamal Kendrick, the part-time security guard, stepped out. Jamal was ex-Army, his service spent pushing papers in a stateside office, not patrolling battlefields. He was burly, his arms crossed, his expression professional, but guarded. "Sir," he said to Elliot, his tone firm but not cruel. "You need to move along. You're causing a disturbance." Elliot didn't budge, his boots planted on the sidewalk. "I'm on a public street," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "I'm asking for a service your shop offers. You want to call the cops over that?" His eyes locked onto Jamal's, searching for a spark of understanding. But Jamal's face remained impassive, caught between duty and discomfort. Tyson, sensing an opportunity, stepped closer, his voice rising. "You're starting to piss me off, Grandpa," he said, grabbing Elliot's arm and yanking him toward the street. The crowd gasped, the woman in flannel stepping forward, her voice sharp. "Tyson, back off. He's not hurting anyone." The teenage boy zoomed in with his phone, whispering, "Holy crap, this is gold." The delivery driver shook his head, muttering, "Not cool, man." Elliot stumbled, his limp flaring as he caught himself against a parking meter. Pain shot through his hip, but he didn't cry out. He straightened, brushing off his jacket, his movement slow and deliberate. Tyson's grip had left a faint red mark on his arm, but it was the insult that stung deeper, the casual cruelty, the dismissal of everything he'd fought for. He thought of Lily, of the wedding, of the pistol that deserved better than this. "You'll see me again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but it carried a weight that silenced the crowd for a moment. Tyson shoved him again, lighter this time, toward the curb. "Get out of here," he growled, his confidence returning now that he had an audience. "And don't come back." The woman in flannel stepped closer, her face flushed. "Tyson, you're crossing a line," she said, her voice shaking with anger. Jamal hesitated, his arms still crossed, his eyes flicking to Elliot, then back to Tyson. He didn't move to intervene, but his frown deepened. Elliot picked up his satchel, his hand steady despite the tremor in his chest. He turned and walked away. His limp more pronounced now, each step a quiet defiance. The crowd parted, some whispering, others filming. As he rounded the corner, the weight of their eyes lingered, but so did the weight of his promise to Lily. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Down the street he stopped at a payphone outside a gas station, its plastic casing cracked but functional. He dialed a number from memory, his fingers steady despite the ache in his arm where Tyson had grabbed him. The line rang twice before a deep voice answered. "Ramsey? That you?" "Yeah, it's me," Elliot said, his voice low, resolute. "I need a favor." The voice on the other end paused, then chuckled softly, a sound that carried the weight of old battles and older bonds. "Thought you'd never ask." Elliot hung up, his gaze drifting back toward Brackenridge Road. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the pavement. Ironclad Firearms stood quiet, its employees unaware of the tide turning against them. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over Brackenridge Road, its warmth softening the edges of Eldridge, Missouri's small-town bustle. The air carried the faint scent of grilled burgers from the diner 2 blocks away, mixed with the sharp tang of gun oil seeping from Ironclad Firearms. Inside the shop, the hum of activity filled the space. Hunters in camo jackets browsed racks of rifles, a young couple debated over a leather holster, and 3 off-duty cops swapped stories near a display of 9mm ammo, their laughter punctuating the twang of a country song crackling through a tinny speaker. Tyson Carver stood behind the counter, his broad shoulders squared, his smirk firmly in place as he rang up a sale for a Glock 19. Devin Pollard, whistling off-key, restocked a case of magazines, while Marla Hensley, back on shift, polished a glass display of revolvers, her movements slow, her face tight with unease. The events of the past 2 days, Elliot Ramsey's quiet request, Tyson's mocking refusal, the shove on the sidewalk, had settled into the shop like dust, a story to chuckle over between customers. Tyson had already retold it twice today, each version painting Elliot as a delusional old man clinging to faded glory. Marla kept her thoughts to herself, but the memory of Elliot's steady gaze lingered, a quiet rebuke she couldn't shake. Outside, Brackenridge Road pulsed with life. Kids on bikes weaved through traffic. A delivery van rumbled past, and a distant siren wailed, fading into the hills. No one noticed the low growl of engines approaching from the north, a sound that grew into a deep, throaty roar, turning heads along the street. 4 black SUVs, their windows tinted dark as night, rolled into view, pulling up in front of Ironclad Firearms with the precision of a military convoy. Their doors opened in unison, and 8 men stepped out, each in black tactical pants and plain T-shirts, their movements fluid, disciplined, like men who'd trained to move as one. The leader, a tall man in his late 40s with close-cropped black hair and a jagged scar across his jaw, carried himself with an air of quiet authority, his eyes scanning the street like a hawk. His name was Gideon Holt, and the weight of his presence seemed to still the air around him. Inside the shop, Tyson was mid-joke, mocking Elliot's war stories to a hunter buying a scope, when Marla glanced out the window. Her rag froze mid-swipe, her breath catching. "Tyson," she said, her voice low, urgent. "You need to see this." The hunter turned, curious, as did the couple at the holster display. Tyson followed Marla's gaze, his smirk faltering as he saw the SUVs and the men now fanning out on the sidewalk. The bell above the door jingled sharply as Gideon Holt stepped inside, followed by 3 of his team. The shop fell silent, the country song suddenly distant, the cops in the corner pausing mid-laugh, their hands instinctively drifting towards their belts. Gideon's eyes swept the room, cold and unyielding, before locking onto Tyson. "You Carver?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel, like a blade held just out of sight. Tyson straightened, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. "Yeah," he said, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Who's asking?" Gideon didn't answer immediately. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small leather case, its edges worn smooth. Flipping it open, he revealed a silver Navy SEAL trident, its gleam catching the fluorescent light. "Gideon Holt," he said, his tone flat, deliberate. "Lieutenant Commander, retired. I'm here about Elliot Ramsey." The name hung in the air, heavy as a storm cloud. Tyson's face paled, his smirk crumbling into something nervous, almost desperate. "The old guy?" he said, his voice cracking slightly. "What, you his caretaker or something?" He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow, swallowed by the silence of the room. Gideon's expression didn't shift, but his men moved subtly, fanning out to cover the shop's corners, their presence a quiet threat. "Elliot Ramsey," Gideon said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife, "served 3 tours in Vietnam, 101st Airborne, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, 2 commendations for valor, saved my life in Fallujah. 03. You disrespected him. You put hands on him in front of a crowd." Tyson's hands twitched on the counter, sweat beading on his forehead. "Look, man, it was just a misunderstanding," he stammered, glancing at Devon for support. But Devon was frozen, his rag dangling from his hand. "I didn't know he was—" "Misunderstanding?" Gideon interrupted, stepping closer, his boots silent on the linoleum. "You mocked a man who carried this country on his back. You shoved him into the street, on camera." He nodded toward the window, where the teenage boy from yesterday lingered, his phone still in hand, the video now spreading across social media like wildfire. The crowd outside was growing. Passers-by, shopkeepers, even the delivery driver from earlier, all drawn by the SUVs and the tension radiating from the shop. Marla set her rag down, her hands trembling. Jamal Kendrick, the security guard, appeared in the doorway, his burly frame filling the space, but he didn't move, his eyes flicking between Gideon and Tyson, his frown deepening. The off-duty cops exchanged glances, one muttering, "This is getting ugly," but they stayed put, sensing something bigger at play. Gideon set a small wooden box on the counter, its surface polished but scarred, like it had traveled through wars of its own. He opened it, revealing the Colt 1911, still wrapped in its cloth, its worn bluing glinting under the lights. "He asked you to clean this," Gideon said, his voice low, deliberate. "It belonged to Marcus Delgado, KIA, Quezon, 68. It's for his daughter's wedding. You refused. You laughed. Now you're going to do the job." Tyson's mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes darted to the pistol, then to Gideon's men, their faces carved from stone. The lead cop, a grizzled man named Randall Pike, stepped forward, his hand raised. "Sir," he said to Gideon, his tone cautious, "we don't want trouble here. Let's talk this out." Gideon turned to him, his gaze steady, unyielding. "No trouble," he said. "Just accountability." He nodded to one of his men, a lean figure with a shaved head, who pulled out a tablet and played the video from yesterday. Tyson's voice blared through the small speaker, mocking, cruel, calling Elliot a has-been, shoving him toward the curb. The crowd inside the shop murmured, some shaking their heads, others glaring at Tyson. The woman in flannel from yesterday, now browsing ammo, crossed her arms. "Told you it was too far," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the room. Tyson's face flushed red, his hands shaking as he gripped the counter. Okay, he stammered, his voice barely audible. "I'll clean the gun, free of charge, all right?" Gideon shook his head, his scar catching the light. "Not good enough," he said. He turned to the crowd, his voice rising just enough to command the room. "This man," he pointed at Tyson, "disrespected a veteran who risked everything for this country. You think that's okay? You think that's who we are?" The silence was deafening. One of the hunters, an older man with a gray beard and a faded Marine's cap, spoke up, his voice rough but firm. "No, sir, it ain't right." A woman near the holster display nodded, her eyes hard. "Shameful," she muttered. The cops stayed quiet, their earlier bravado gone, their faces tight with discomfort. Gideon turned back to Tyson, his voice low again, almost a whisper. "You're done here," he said. "Your boss gets this video unless you make it right. Now." Tyson's hands fumbled as he reached for the 1911, his fingers unsteady. "I'll do it," he said, his voice breaking. "I'll do it today." He started unwrapping the cloth, his movements jerky, like a man under a spotlight. Gideon nodded once, then turned toward the door. His men followed, their boots silent, their presence lingering like a shadow. As they reached the exit, the bell jingled again, and Elliot Ramsey stepped inside. The crowd parted, every eye on him. He looked the same. Denim jacket, slight limp, satchel in hand. But now the room felt his presence, a quiet gravity that filled the space. His hazel eyes scanned the shop, pausing on Tyson, then Gideon, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Elliot walked to the counter, his boots scuffing softly, and set the satchel down with care. "Make it quick," he said to Tyson, his voice calm, steady, carrying the weight of a lifetime. Tyson nodded, avoiding his gaze, and began working on the pistol, his hands shaking under the weight of the room's eyes. The crowd began to stir, some drifting toward the door, others lingering, watching Elliot with a mix of awe and respect. The woman in flannel approached, her grocery bag still in hand. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she said softly. "You didn't deserve that." Elliot nodded, his face softening. "Appreciate it," he said, his voice low, warm. "Some folks just need a reminder." Jamal Kendrick stepped forward, his broad frame hesitant but sincere. He extended a hand. "I should have stepped in," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I'm sorry, sir." Elliot shook his hand, his grip firm despite his years. "You're here now," he said. "That's enough." Outside, the SUVs idled, their engines a low rumble. Gideon and his men climbed in, the doors closing with a quiet thud. As they pulled away, the shop felt smaller, the air lighter but still charged with the weight of what had happened. Tyson worked in silence, his head bowed, the 1911 gleaming under his trembling hands. Elliot sat on a stool by the counter, his satchel at his feet, his gaze steady. He didn't gloat, didn't smile. He just waited, his dignity a quiet force, the memory of Marcus Delgado and a promise kept filling the space around him. The crowd thinned, some clapping Elliot on the shoulder as they left, others offering nods of respect. The older hunter in the Marine's cap paused at the door, turning back. "You're a good man, Ramsey," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Elliot nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips, the first real one in days. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of fire, ironclad firearms grew quiet, the country song fading into the background. Elliot's eyes drifted to the 1911, its polished grips catching the light, a piece of Marcus brought back to life for Lily's wedding. He thought of her smile, of the promise he'd kept, and for the first time in days, the ache in his chest eased, replaced by a quiet pride.